Hey guys, welcome back to Allison Unfiltered. I have the coolest guest today, and she has an amazing story. So please welcome my friend and author, Caitlynn Carson. She is the author of the book, I Loved You at Your Darkest. Oh my gosh, I get chills thinking about that. So welcome to the podcast, Caitlin. How are you today?
Oh, thank you. I'm really great today.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you're here. I cannot wait to hear your story behind this book. So, um, everybody has a reason. I'm just going to jump right in it, right? So, tell me a little bit about you, where you're from, and, what got you, not necessarily what got you here, but I mean, writing a book's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal, and it didn't seem like it at first. But let's start off. I am a 30-year-old mother of two children, ages 4 and 6. I am from New York, Western New York, more specifically, not New York City. I have been married for 11 years. My husband is an Army veteran, a paid fireman, and an armed security guard. Um, And like I said, I definitely did not plan on writing a book. Growing up, you think you're going to be 100 different things. And not once did I ever think in my childhood or my young adult life that I would ever write a book. Um, it actually started off by, I just wanted to write it down for my kids. My mom's life was a huge secret to all of us. I mean, we knew who she was in her adult years, but I never knew anything about her childhood growing up. I never knew um, a lot of the trauma that she went through. And I, for a long time, I think I just looked at her as she was just my mom. That's it. It was almost like she had no other story than the one that she had in my life. So I just didn't want that for my kids. I wanted them to know that I'm not just their boring mom, that there's a reason why I do what I do now, why I'm here, who I am. And I want them to know that even your boring parents go through trials their entire life, and it's possible to come out on the other side and have the upper hand. Um, I just wanted them to know that there's more to people than what they see.
Well, you and I have very similar childhoods, growing up with our moms and it's hard, we do these things and we don't want to disparage anybody, right? And we have to be careful what we say because we don't want to hurt anybody, right?
Right.
Uh, but the flip side of that is this is our story and it's how it's happened to us and it's our perspective. And I think it's okay to share what your perspective is. We talked about this the other day. You're in more of a comfortable position to talk about things because your mom has passed, right? And my mom has not. And there are just some things that I'll share one day, but I can't share now, and it's because I love her. Regardless of everything that's happened, I love my
Yeah.
mom.
Right. Right. And yeah, it's hard to share something so personal, and you're right. The only reason that I am able to share my story is because my mom has passed. Um, and I've, you know, I've struggled with it a lot because even though she's not here, I don't want people to look down on her. But there were a lot of really hard things that we went through because of the decisions that my mom made. Um, so I see it now more as my story because my mom is gone, um, rather than her story. Um, and it still affects your family. You're absolutely right. My dad has made a couple of comments. My dad is my biggest supporter, hands down.
Hey,
But he,
can I
he
pause you really fast?
yeah,
Can you sit still?
sorry.
I'm like, I'm watching you.
I have a swivel chair. I'm sorry. I will do my best to stay still.
Well, I'm just because I'm such a visual person that I'm like watching you and I'm going,
Sorry.
no, no, listen, this is all live stuff. And what I love to see is I love the psychology of things, right? And so when we get in, some people like talk with their hands when they get nervous, right? Or when they're doing something new. And some
Sometimes I do
people
too.
like, and some people like twist in their chair, and some people are like all over the place. So no, I think it's interesting to see that there are behaviors that we have that happen when we do get uncomfortable, and I think it's always interesting to see everybody's different behaviors because I see them all the time. So me calling you out is not me calling you out. It's just like I'm going to be distracted the whole time. So, and I'm a squirrel.
Well, if you notice something, I mean, call me out. I'm pretty good at that. I will
Well,
try to
and
sit still.
that's what I loved about our conversation before is that we're we're both very straightforward women, and people like us, we either get along or we don't,
Yep.
and so very fortunately we do get along, and I just I was thinking about you after we talked the other day, and I'm like, gosh, you're so young. You're so young to lose your mom already. You're only 30. And how long has she been gone?
She passed away in 2019, so
How old were
four
you?
4 years. Um, 25.
So you're 25 when you lost your mom.
Yep.
That's mind-blowing to me because as much as my mom drives me crazy, I don't know, like that's my mom. So that makes me sad for you. Um, because I can't even imagine, right? Even though they don't make the best decisions and they don't do the right things for us sometimes, they're still your mom at the end of the day. And you still want their love, you know?
Yes.
So I'm gonna shut up now because I'm a big baby. And you can obviously see this is a very touchy subject for me. So tell me, let's back up and talk about, you know, what was it like in your childhood? What was your earliest? Because we all have that like earliest scary memory of, oh, this isn't good, right?
Yeah. So a lot of my early memories, I think I might have almost blocked out as a, I don't know if it was a way of self-preservation
Sure.
or I'm not really sure what it was. So I don't remember a lot of the more traumatic events until I was about probably between 8 and 10. I remember a lot of stories, um, and I've had my siblings and my dad fill in the gaps of the pieces of the stories that I remember. Um, but I guess probably the most traumatic or the turning point for me when I was a kid. I think I was around the age of 10. So my mom very often would go missing. She would just leave. She would often steal vehicles. She stole my dad's work truck at one point. But the one that I remember specifically, I don't know how she got where she was. Probably her car. But she had been missing for about 3 or 4 days, which was usually normal. But she always came home, always. And something that she always told me was that I was the reason she came home.
Mm.
Um, One time, uh, I think I was about 10. She hadn't come home for about 4 days, and my dad stayed home all of those days, pacing back and forth, taking care of me, not knowing where she was, not knowing if or when she would come home. As a child, I always thought, well, she'll be home. She always comes home. Um, but as an adult, I can't imagine the thoughts that were going through my dad's head. You know, is she lying in a ditch somewhere? Is she dead? Is she coming home? Has she chose, you know, did she choose to just leave? Um, well, it was eating at him to the point where he had to go look for her. So the first and only time he took me with him to find her was this time, and it's something that he deeply regrets. But and as traumatic as it was for me, I'm actually quite thankful that he took me with him, even as a child. Um, we knew where she was as far as the town. We knew what city she was in. Um, we didn't really know where she was in that city. So he drove around for a little while, and we had a single cab pickup truck at the time, and he found her. She was walking down the street, very disheveled, clothes all over the place, hair absolute mess, and she was carrying a large bottle of vodka. And I remember laughing as a teenager about what she had said, but she said, you know, who's going to notice? It's clear. It looks just like water. You know, she was so far gone, so far out of it. But then, you know, he tried to get her to come home with us, and I remember he opened the passenger door, and I had scooched over into the center of the single cab, and to make room for her to get in, and I remember she just she fought him. She said, I don't want to go with you. I'm not going with you. Um, and he said, you know, yes, you are. Of course you are. And I remember him. He picked her up and tried to set her into the truck seat, and she just started fighting, kicking, scratching, biting, screaming, and refused to go anywhere near us. And I remember I just started crying. And I remember thinking, what's wrong? Why doesn't mommy want to come home with me? What did I do? Um, you know, what's wrong with me instead of what's wrong with her? So that made an impact on me as far as an adult. I realized how children can internalize things, and you know, we don't know what's going on with our parents. We don't know why they make the decisions that they do, but they certainly impact us as a child. But you know, the experience from that specific event has stuck with me until, you know, obviously until now. And it's a driving force for me. It is. I want to be the person that I needed as a child and the person that my mom needed as an adult.
That's a lot to put on your shoulders.
It was. It was, but you know, when people say to me, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry you had to go through everything that you went through with your mom. Yeah, it sucked. It was a lot. It was hard. But I don't ever wish I had a different life. I don't, because there was a lesson in everything. And like I said, to today, it's my driving force. It's my driving force to be who I am, and to get out there and help people. God
Mhm.
meant it for good.
Oh, for sure. I think that, they say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think we're in such a position these days that there's so much carried on our shoulders as moms, and there's so much that our kids don't know, and there's so much that we don't want our kids to know. But I think that if you're not telling your kids who you are and you're just putting this like fake persona out there, your kids, it doesn't help them. They don't learn anything from that. And so I remember having a conversation with my son going into sixth or seventh grade, and we were on the way to school one day, and I don't know why this just popped up, but um, I told him, I said, I know you don't understand how bad my drug addiction was, but addiction runs rampant in our families on both sides, your dad's side, my side, everything. And you just never know what your body's going to get hooked to. You never know what it's going to fall in love with and or what it's going to need, right? And so your best bet is just don't touch it. Don't touch anything. And that stuck with him, and that's something I've told all of our kids as they've been growing up and been real honest about our past. And why do you have to go to the dentist so much? Well, I did so much cocaine and meth that it ruined my teeth, and and so that's where I am, you know. Um, but being honest with my kids didn't keep it a mystery, you know? And so there was no mystery to drugs and alcohol. There was no mystery, there was no secrecy, there was no none of that. And fortunately to this day we have four sons that don't do drugs, and I think my oldest might have a drink every once in a while, but it's not, there's no addiction issues there. And he's 26, so he's a grown man. He can have a drink. So was it just vodka with your mom, or was it more than that?
Um, no, it was much more than that. My mom's drink of choice, I suppose, would be vodka. She was an alcoholic and a substance user. Um, she she tried just about everything that I can think of, but her main, I'd say her main substances were pills, um, Xanax, Loratab, Ritalin. Those are the main ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. But yeah, I think it's really important that we are transparent with our kids. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know about your mom, but my mom and my grandmother and pretty much everyone on that side of the family, they really grew up in a world where if something happens to you, you don't speak of it. It happens, you sweep it under the rug. No one is allowed to acknowledge that anything is wrong within your nuclear family. Um,
Yes.
and I think that that is so damaging, so damaging. It is detrimental to your mental health to speak your truths, to acknowledge what happens to you so that you can heal from it. And if you just go through life shoving everything down as deep as you can and get, as deep as you can get it, and you just pretend like you are a perfect nuclear family, then everything will crash. And I think
Oh
that's
yeah,
what
because
happened.
it'll all come back. Yeah,
Absolutely. And
it'll all
I
come back.
yeah, I wholeheartedly believe that that's what has happened to, my mom and a lot of her family. And I'm not saying that I come straight out and tell my kids, like grandma was smoking meth, or see this sink over here, I used to have to wipe off all the pill powder after grandma would snort it up her nose. Of course I don't say those things. I have found a way to explain it to my children. People get stuck. And that's kind of how I've explained it to them is grandma loved you. Grandma was the greatest grandma ever. She did everything for her kids, everything for her grandkids, but she got stuck, and she just couldn't get unstuck. Um, and sure, I started writing the book to tell my kids everything. And there are copies set aside for them specifically, but they are not allowed to read it until they are much older. And I'm not going to, you know what I mean? You have to censor it, but be
Sure.
transparent. If you're not transparent, like you said, you have been so real with your kids that you've dissolved the mystery behind drugs. It's not fun for them anymore. If they hear the dangers behind it, the real life stories that affect them and affect their
Yes.
family, then it's not so fun anymore. It's not mysterious. There's no mystique behind it for them to want it. They're
Right.
like, no thanks.
Right.
I saw what it does.
Well, and the fact that both of their fathers were meth addicts, and alcoholics, that doesn't, I mean, that affects them even more, my kids have never seen me out of control. I mean, fortunately, I got clean before I had Brighton, right? But they've never seen me drunk or out of control or any of those things ever. And that was the one thing that, how you have this. The one thing I remember growing up is my mom being out of control when she was drunk. And I never, ever, ever wanted my kids to experience what I felt in those moments.
Yep.
Period. End of story. And that is that was my driving force, is that my kids would never. Now my kids have seen me emotionally out of control, and that is something I'm definitely not proud of. Um, but we're all human too, right? You know, and we all have hurts, and they have hurts, and I didn't raise them perfectly. I'm not a perfect mom by any means. I've made tons of mistakes as a parent, and you have to figure out how to break that cycle, right? Because it's so easy to get right back, to fall back into that trap of, well, this is how my parents used to treat me, so this is just, instead of taking a step back, right? And going, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Instead of reacting, you you just have to get a hold of yourself for a moment. And that is so hard for so many people to do. That's probably one of the hardest things to do, is to not react. And that's one of the things, we talk about in the jail, with the kids all the time, is what the one thing that you have about yourself that you can control is your agency. And your agency is how you react to things that happen around you, to you, whatever it may be. Right? That's all you got.
Yep.
You got your word, and you got your agency. That's what you have. And so I've learned a lot about that and reacting. I get why people have kids later in life. We have our shit together a little more later in life. Some of us do, right? And you can tell the difference between my oldest and my youngest in how they were raised, just by my maturity levels and what I knew and the wisdom that I had, right? My
Yeah.
Brighton and I, we grew up together. I was 21 years old when I had him. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't a grown up. I thought I was. I thought I knew everything. I know doo-doo squat, right? Nothing. And the things that I know now at 48 that I thought I knew at 30, I didn't know anything, right? It's just the wisdom. And I think that's why, grandparents are so important in children's lives, because they can give these kids wisdom that, like, my mom is the same way. My mom would do anything for her kids. She would do anything for her grandkids, but when the addiction takes over, you, you can't, I don't know. I always say my mom's the most selfish, selfless person on the planet. Does
Yes.
that
You know
make
what?
sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It does. My mom was the same. My mom would do anything and everything for her kids, for her grandkids, for me, for my brothers. My mom
For
loved us
anybody that they knew.
wholeheartedly.
For
Yeah,
anybody that they knew, they'd give somebody the shirt off their back. They'd give somebody
absolutely.
$100 out of their purse if they had it. They would, like, that's what's mind blowing, right?
Because
God.
when they, you know, when they are when they've got their blinders on, when they're in tunnel vision and they are looking for their next fix, or whatever it is, they are not themselves. It's not them who's driving. It's the substance. It's the alcohol. It's the drug. It's you
Mhm.
know. It's never just. It's never them in control. They are not in control. They're there,
Yeah.
but they're somewhere in the back seat going, all right, let's go. Let's get happy. Let's feel better for a minute.
Yeah. So when you lost your mom, and this is something we didn't talk about, did she did she pass away of natural causes or did she take her own life?
Um, it was natural. Um, can't tell you exactly what that death certificate said, but there was about three, three or four, um, you know, died from this because of this, because of this, because of this. Um, basically, my mom was also a diabetic, so drinking was horrendous for her, and then mixing it with all the other substances. Um, it eventually just took a toll on her. She stopped breathing. She died of asphyxiation, and then her heart stopped. Um, and it was basically her body just shut down. I mean, she had been in kidney failure for years, but really refused to acknowledge it. Her liver was shutting down over the years. She couldn't walk very well. Her neuropathy was terrible. She started walking with a cane at the age of probably 53 or 54, and she passed when she was 56.
That's so young. You know,
Yeah,
you think about that, like when we're kids, 50's old, right? And then when
we were getting
we're
close to
and then
60.
when yeah, and then we're 40 and we're like, oh, that's coming down the tracks. That's
Right.
not old, you
Right.
know. Um, I'm sure as with my mama, you've seen your mom go through some real hard stuff
Yeah.
and some hard times and it's hard to watch, right? It's hard to because you become the person that has to take care of the addict rather than you being the child.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
And that's go ahead.
yeah, growing up wasn't too bad. I mean, my dad took on most of the responsibility. Um, there was a point. Oh, sorry, I'm backtracking. Let
You're
me start
okay.
over.
You're good.
Let me let me start over. Um, refresh my memory as to what you just asked me.
Oh god. Uh Good lord. I don't know. What were we were talking about
Oh, being the parent instead of the child.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. I got this.
Yeah, you got this. I'm glad you remembered what I was talking about because I don't.
Um, so growing up, wasn't so bad. I had older siblings, and my dad usually took most of the responsibility, or someone else did. Um, but then, growing up into a young adult was when it really hit me. My oldest brother moved out of our house when I was, I think, 4. He was around the age of 16. So he really didn't grow up with us, but I had another older brother who is 7 years older than me. So we grew up together. Um, but, as I got older, my dad and I really relied on each other for everything. I mean, he called me every time there was a hiccup. He would sneeze and he'd like, "Hey, what you doing?" Um, so when it came to something that my mom needed, or I only live 8 minutes down the road from my dad and where my mom lived. So a lot of the time, it was me and dad. It was me and dad all the time taking care of mom, everything she ever needed. Um, so every time every time something exploded, or for lack of a better term, everything hit the fan, um, dad called me and I would be there in a heartbeat. It didn't matter if it was 2 o'clock in the morning. It didn't matter if it was the middle of a snowstorm. I was there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it and I was never a live-in caretaker, but it definitely falls on your shoulders.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I listen to your story and I'm like, I hate that you had such a hard time with your mom, but you're so blessed to have your dad, too.
Right.
And it had to be, it had to be hard for him because of what he was dealing with, right? And then and so much of us, we lean on each other, whether we should or we shouldn't, or whether it's the right thing to do. It's just what happens. And my dad was not there at all. Like, rarely ever. And so I had my older brother who was like, he's 2.5 years older than me. And he was done with her in his teen years. You know what I'm saying? So everything always fell on me, but it wasn't like my dad calling me to tell me, it was always my mom, right? So I would have to rescue her.
Right.
And I don't know how. And I think that's the hardest thing, is I don't know how to not rescue her because I'm such a helper, and I have such a, a, a deep-seated loyalty to a fault that I'm willing to be so loyal to someone who breaks you down so much. But I feel like I don't have a choice. Like, that's my mom. That's what I'm supposed to just take it, right?
You're right. Yeah, you're right. And you look at it like, how can I give up on this person? She's not just a person. She is my mom. How can I give up on my
She's my
mom?
mother.
Right.
Right. She birthed me. And I've talked about, boundaries and stuff with the counselor that I have, and she's been great. And it's just like, you have to figure out whether you're willing to live with the guilt of the boundaries, or whether you're willing to live with the abuse. Those are your only options.
It
And
is, but
I don't, and neither one of those are options for me
right. Unfortunately,
because it's my mom.
exactly, exactly. And I don't, honestly, I don't know if it's possible to escape the guilt. I think no matter what choice you have, there's going to be guilt. I mean, I chose to not give up on my mom. There were plenty of times where I wanted to. I wanted to give up so bad. I was so tired of being drugged through her drama. And there was a point in my life where I had kids. Well, I had a kid. My mom never hasn't met my son. She passed while I was pregnant with him. But there was a point where I had to sit down and think, I have a kid now. Do I want them to see what I saw growing up? Do I want them to see grandma the way that I saw mom? And there were a lot of times where I thought, I need to separate myself from this. I need to get my kids as far away from this as possible. But I couldn't. I could not give up on my mom. I loved her too much. She was in there somewhere. I couldn't give up hope. My my parents were married for almost 35 years, I think it was. Um, and a lot of times my dad looks at me and he'll tell me that he was such an idiot for sticking around, for letting her put him and us through so much. But at the same time, I I think I think that him sticking it out was the most commendable thing ever. You know, he was he was there for her no matter what. He loved her unconditionally and he went through hell for it. But in that, I always had a mom. I found a purpose. That's my purpose today because I was exposed to that. And not only is it commendable because he stuck around, but she always came home. And I know she says it was for the kids. I know she says it was for me, but there's a really big part of me that knows that she came home because she knew my dad would never leave her. And I don't sometimes I think that she, you know, ran him over, it just threw him to
Right.
the ground and ran him over with
Took
a
it
bus on
took it for
purpose.
granted. Yeah.
Right. He definitely did it at times, but I think a lot of that was also such a huge comfort for her. She knew that I guess it's for me, it's the idea of my relationship with God, knowing that I can do the absolute worst and he will always love me and always be there for me. I feel like my dad was that for my mom.
Yeah. And and as well he should be if we're following, I mean, it says, it talks about how women should submit to their husband, but what everybody forgets is the part that follows that that says, as long as he is Christ-like, you know, and that right there that you're talking about your dad speaks volumes. And that's how it's easy for people in addiction to take advantage of their family members or their husbands or their spouse or their children, because they take advantage of the fact that those people aren't going to leave them, you know, and that they're gonna put up with them no matter what they put them through. Uh,
Right.
and that's just hard. And I want to hear more about like how you came to write the book. I loved you at your darkest. I still, that the title of that gives me chills every time I read it. It gives me chills. I don't want you to tell too much though, because I want people to go get your book. I want people to go read it. Go on Amazon. All you have to do is look up Caitlynn. It's Caitlynn Carson, and I loved you at your darkest. But you know, there comes a point where you have to get it out. You have to get it out. You have to get it out some way. And so my outlet has been this podcast. The idea of writing a book, people are like, you should write a book about your life, and I'm like, no, I'll just talk about it. I'll just this podcast is the book of my life, right? Um, and it's a blessing, but it also, you know, it tells I tell the truth, and there's a lot of people that don't like it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but
I,
here's the
I,
thing, it doesn't matter what we do. There's always going to be haters there, but and the thing that we talked about the other day is, if it offends you, it probably applies to you, and that's why you don't want to hear it, right?
absolutely.
So, um we only have about 10 minutes left, so I wanted to tell me a little bit more about how you got to where, um, you know, your salvation, and, what made you write this book. I'm trying to find the right words, but I'm like, I'm so immersed in the story right now, that
Um, so growing up, I really, my mom wasn't a Christian. My father was an atheist. Um, really, the only Christians that I knew were my grandparents, my mom's parents, and they lived in Florida. So I really didn't have much guidance going there. Um, I knew the simple stories. I had gone to Sunday school. I lived with my grandparents in Florida for about a year, and I went to Sunday school every Sunday, and so I knew the basic stories, the Noah's Ark and things like that,
sure.
but I had no idea what God had to offer. Um, Around the age of 10, I met a friend who lived right down the road from me, and her family, they were a fantastic family. They were a saving grace for me. Um, I became a member of their family so easily. And 23, 24 years later, um, I still am very good friends with this friend. We are adult friends. Our children are best friends. Um, so they were a saving grace for me. Um, they listened to some Christian music. I don't really remember anyone ever going to church. There wasn't really much Christian talk in the house, but they definitely listened to Christian music. Um, and because she was my best friend, so did I. I did everything she did. She was a little older than me. Uh, but one year when I was 16, we went to a local festival called Kingdom Bound, and it's a multi-Christian artist 3 day concert basically. Um, and I was really excited. I was excited to hear some of the bands that we knew, and there was a lot that I didn't. So the first night went great. It was my first concert ever. I had a blast listening to some songs that I knew. And then the second day comes, and I really didn't know any of the people that were getting on to play. But one of them was called Seventh Day Slumber. And before they were supposed to play, the lead singer was going to get on it and do some motivational speaking. I had no plans for anything happening that day aside from absorbing some good music. And God had so much better plans. So while this guy was speaking, um, it started to sprinkle a little bit. And I can't even tell you what he said, but I remember everything that I felt. Everything. It was like it was like everything that I had shoved down deep or held inside of me had bubbled up into my throat and just exploded. I I remember feeling it was literal weight lifted off of my shoulders. It was incredible. I started everything that I felt came out of my eyes and I just sobbed. And I remember him saying, if you're ready to accept Christ, come up here to the front of the stage and get on your knees and do it now. And it just like out of a movie scene, it started pouring. So the next thing I know, I am on my knees in front of a stage in the pouring rain accepting Christ. I had no idea where my friend was. Um, he just kind of hung back and waited for me. And so that was the day that I was saved. Um, when I went home, we were back to normal. We were back to every day is exactly the same. I had no guidance. I had no one to teach me what God had to offer. I had no one to help me in my walk. Um, so I had accepted Christ. I knew who he was. I knew he was real without a doubt, and I knew that he loved me. But that was it. So I had started to fall away. And when I got married 11 years ago, um, I started a rocky relationship with my mother-in-law, and since then it has grown into something so much bigger. And she has become probably my best guidance. So she has brought me full circle. She has taught me so much. And when I started writing down my story, like I said, it was basically just to tell my kids, about me and what I had gone through and where I am. And there was just something in the back of my head, and it's almost like, I don't know about for you, but when God is speaking to me, I hear the same message over and over and over again. And for me, it was something, I kept reading it. I'd read it here, I'd hear it here, I'd read it again over here. And it was just something that said, go bigger, tell your story, tell your story, tell your story. And finally I was reading a book and I saw it and I said, okay, I hear you, Lord, I hear you. And it took me a little over 2 years to write everything. It was so cathartic. I can't even I can't begin to tell you the amount of crying and the amount of tissues that I went through writing everything and reliving it and editing it over and over again. Um, it was so therapeutic and healing.
I feel that. I feel that every every bit of that. That I think that's what this podcast has been for me, right? It's just like, um, we edit it, we watch the clips, we create the clips, we do all the things, and you're just constantly reliving it. And but I think that that's how it comes out. That's how it gets out, right? You can't keep it all stuffed in for a long time because when you do, bad things happen from that. And you end up reacting, right?
That's how you develop
I
poor
don't,
coping methods.
well, there's that too. You know, I can't say that I ever had anyone strong in my life. I have one person. Her name is Charmaine, and she was who was going to be my mother-in-law until God set another plan in motion. Um, but I've always had a close relationship with her, and she has a very close relationship with God, and I very much look up to how she does things. You know, there's a lot of people who are very hypocritical. And I know her kids growing up in her home felt that way with them sometimes. And I don't know, I just never got that feeling from her. It was just, she just exuded wisdom, you know, and I just wanted to hear more and learn more and be more. And then I met Holly, who is the one of, I mean, she's my best friend adult wise, you know, and and I never really wanted to know much about the Bible until I met her, you know. And so I've read more of the Bible in the last 2 years than I have in my entire life. And it's stuck, and these stories stuck, and I can hear myself. I'm like, I'll like repeat something like, oh well, hey, in John 4 it said, and I remember the story because it resonated with me. And then I'm thinking in my head, like, who the hell am I? Like, who is this? Like,
Where'd that
you
come from?
know, yeah, where'd that come from? Who am I to recite this that God has given us such grace, and I'm so thankful for that. And I'm not a perfect human being, and I never will be a perfect human being. And you know, it's so interesting you told that story about your experience of coming to Christ. And and I was walking the other day, and I thought, you know, I don't remember being baptized because I was baptized very, very young as a baby. And I was listening to Need to Breathe, Washed by the Water.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder, like, would it be different to do it now? You know?
You know, I don't think I was ever baptized as a child. Um, and it wasn't until about 2 years ago, oh, three now actually, that I chose to be baptized myself. Um, and it it's so much different. There's so much more meaning behind it. You know, and I mean, if I could, I'd do it again. I'd do it again and again and again because it, it's not when you give yourself to Christ, you've already done that. It
Right.
is, it's the next stage. It's saying, I'm ready to tell people about this. I'm ready to go public. I'm ready to wear God's love on my sleeve and shine and just and like your friend, you know, you said that you didn't really want anything, you know, you didn't want to read the Bible before you met her, before she came into your
Right.
life. And I wholeheartedly believe, I mean, God uses us, you know, as vessels to do his work. And I wholeheartedly believe that those people are put in our life for that exact reason. And I'm pretty positive she was, you know, showing so much of God's love and God's favor. And, you know, you can see what he's done for her. And you're like, I like that. I want
I
that.
want that.
I
Yeah.
want that. I want it
I
bad.
want people to feel Jesus when they're near me. You know, I want them. I mean, and don't get me wrong, she's no, you know, she's what she's got a shirt that says like a little holy, a little hoodish, you know. You know, she got some little gangsta to her, which is what I love about her. But I've never had a friend like her in my whole life, you know, that I don't know how to explain it. But I'm the luckiest person in the world if I get to see her, you know, more than once a week, right? That's just how I feel. And the thing is, she feels the same way about me, you know, and
Yep.
our personalities are so similar. Um, but I do wonder, and I've been thinking about that a lot. You know, I don't go to church. My church is Wednesday night with the kids at the jail. I mean, that's just my church. So, you know, I don't know. I think it would be really cool to have Holly come over to my house and baptize me in my swimming pool. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it
I was
doesn't have to
baptized in the swimming pool.
where you well, it
I
doesn't
was.
have to be it doesn't have to be a pastor, right? It's just someone who like it's not about a certificate, it's about a moment in time, right? That changes you. So I feel like you know, Jesus didn't do all the baptizing. John did a lot of the baptizing, and I don't think it has to be. I just think it has to be someone that exudes that for you, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just kind of my feeling on it.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's a I'm ready to go public thing. If you're comfortable with having someone who has held your hand through your whole walk, then do it. I mean, go for it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is between it's between you and God, but it's between you, God, and the rest of the world. That is, you talked about your friend being a little hoodish, not being perfect, or and as hard as it is for us to be so open and so raw, people see that. People see how genuine you are, and they're like, I know she's not perfect, but she still shines for Christ. Like Jesus is still all over her, and then they can look at themselves and say, well, I'm not perfect, and neither is she, but she's all about, she's shine, she's everywhere. And and then they realize how attainable it is, how close it is to them, and they can just reach out and grab it, just ask, and it's theirs. I
Yeah.
think us being so open and raw and genuine is an invitation for people who are just like us to come in and take his hand. So, if
Well,
go ahead.
none of his disciples were perfect.
Absolutely.
They were the trash of the trash. You
Right.
know.
But yeah, but I also feel like sometimes we have a hard time making a connection with them because we see them as Jesus's disciples. They, to us, yes, the Bible tells us that they weren't perfect people, and it spells out, all the wrongdoings and all the bad things and all the sins that they did. But we don't necessarily form a personal connection with them because they were from ancient times. It's hard to make a connection in with characters in the Bible, I think. Um, so I think when it's a friend, like someone who has come into your life, someone that is your friend, that their sins and you've seen them, like you don't just hear about them, you've seen them. It is so much different because you can also, you can confide in them and say, you can
Yeah.
ask them questions. You can say, I want what you got. Where'd you get it? You know,
Right.
um, you can't ask Mary that. You can't ask Paul that. Um, but I guess I don't. I guess that's what it is for me. It's a one-on-one connection.
Yeah. And I think so too. I mean, I'm just not a I mean, that's a whole nother subject of why I don't go to church, but if you ever listen to any of the podcasts, you'll know because I went into that. It
Church
just
is
never was
hard.
a good experience. Church is hard.
Church is hard.
It is. But I think you have such a powerful story. I personally cannot wait to read your book. It is in my list of books. That I'm a huge reader. I love to read, so I'm very anxious to hear it and read it, and I'm excited for you that it's out there. So, plug your book for us again.
It is I Loved You at Your Darkest, The Memoir of a Christian by Caitlynn Carson on Amazon.
Heck yeah. Listen, this has been so good, and I could sit here and probably talk to you for another hour, which is like what we did on the phone the other day. Um, but I'm so glad to know you. I hope to get to follow you longer, and I hope that your book just reaches the people that it needs to reach, and so very many, because there are so many of us that need it, you know,
Thank you. You know
and
what?
and, and don't even realize we need it.
Oh yeah, you know, I thought it was going to be really hard for sales, and I mean, don't get me wrong, they're definitely declining since since the first month that I published. Um, but I really thought that my targeted audience would be so small because not only is it a Christian book, which, limits it down already, but it's written by a female and there's a lot of female subjects in there. So mostly my audience is female Christians, and the younger generation, isn't really into a lot of that. So then we move up to older female Christians. So I thought that, my circle was this big. Um, but it's not. And I have seen so many people, non Christians, and people that I know personally that I know are not Christians, reading my book. And I know that a lot of that is like on the local level, like, oh, so and so wrote a book. I'm going to check it out, you know, but they're still picking it up and they're still reading it. And I am just like, oh my
Yeah,
God,
and
like
it's it,
I can't believe it worked.
yeah, and they're still hearing your testimony and your
Yeah.
witness and all of it, and that's what I feel like this podcast is for me too. That just a different way of sharing and of getting to know, and of, hey, maybe if you are interested, let's talk about it,
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
but
my dad works with an older gentleman. I don't know if he's Christian or not. I really don't. But his very long time girlfriend, I guess they weren't married. She just passed away. But I think probably a week before she passed, my dad was very insistent on getting him a copy of my book. So my dad bought a copy from me. I signed it. He hand delivered it. They talked for 45 minutes once he figured out who the heck I was. He was like, "Oh my gosh, she's so and so," So, um, and that man sat down and read my book. He's not finished with it, but he sat down and read my book that night, and he made it a point to not only tell my father, but to tell my husband to tell me how awesome it is. And he also said a couple nights before his girlfriend passed, um, she said, "You don't read books. I can't believe you're reading a book, let alone that far into it already." Um, and there has been a surprising amount of people that have said, I picked it up and expected to read a chapter or two, and I finished it within, that night, within a couple hours. I couldn't put it down. And I'm like, geez, I didn't know my life was that interesting. Like, I hope it's not just my life that's that interesting. I hope it's something resonating with inside them. But
sure.
so many people that I've not expected to pick this book up have picked it up. And it is very evident to me that God is doing his work. God, like I have just been trying to take a back seat, like still putting in the effort, obviously reaching out and finding ways to advertise. But he has really just been like, I got this, and
Yeah.
I'm like, all
Oh
right.
yeah. Yeah, you just have to let him take the driver's seat for sure. Jesus,
Yeah.
take the wheel, 100%. All right. Well, we got to shut this down.
All right.
Otherwise, we won't keep people's attention long enough. But listen, thank you. You guys, you can find this. It's Okay, I'm going to go back through this again. Caitlynn Carson, I Loved You at Your Darkest. You can find it on Amazon. This podcast, Allison Unfiltered, it is on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the good things. And you guys go buy Caitlynn's book. I can't wait to read it. And thank you so, so much for being here. You're awesome. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
you so
having me.
much. You're very,
Thank
very
you.
welcome.